1. This experience happened to me about 15 or so years ago, and it still haunts and intrigues me to this day. I'm hoping to see if anyone has any thoughts or explanations about it. I was driving home from work one night, about 5 or 6 p.m. I was halfway home and going through downtown in my city, and all of a sudden, I turned left onto a street, and things became weird. During this time, I was very present in my surroundings, and wasn't on what I call autopilot, you know. How sometimes when you drive a route you have driven a million times, that you sometimes space off thinking about whatever, and next thing you know, you're at your destination, but don't remember the actual drive there. It was a sunny day all day, and it was still beautiful and sunny outside on my way home that summer day when things changed. It was suddenly as if I was in a grey, black and white world. And it was a depressing atmosphere. The only thing I can compare it to is old pictures of war-torn cities from the 30s and 40s. When I left work, I had turned my favorite radio station on in my car and turned the volume up almost all the way, singing and having a good old time. I'm too sexy for my car, too sexy for my car. But suddenly, when everything turned dreary and there was no color in that world, it also became very silent. At first, I noticed a man standing on the street corner, and as I passed, we connected eyes, and we just stared at each other as I drove by in what seemed to be slow motion. Next, I was still in the same street, getting to where a streetlight was, the last traffic stop, before the road went up a hill and became a bridge over the railroad tracks below. For clarity, I knew where I was. The street and traffic lights were actually there. I was not transported to a different location during this time. My world was still silent and colorless. As I passed the last intersection before the bridge, I remember thinking, did I just run the red light back there? Because I did not stop at the intersection, but kept going. As there was no color, I did not see a red or green light, nor could I tell if one light was shaded darker than the other to tell if it was red or green. It normally takes less than a minute to go up over the bridge, but I remember thinking that it was taking an inordinate amount of time to go over that bridge. And everything was still black and white, and eerily silent. The one thing I still remember so vividly about this time is that I felt the deepest sense of calm. I had never felt so calm in my life. And even though I couldn't explain what was happening, I somehow knew everything was okay. Also, I remember feeling that if I were to die at that moment, everything would be fine. I did worry briefly, as I had passed the light, that maybe I did run the light and maybe I was already dead. But this experience had started a block before I ever got to the lighted intersection, so hopefully I wasn't dead. There were some stressful things going on in my life at the time. The most stressful thing I was working through was making a decision to leave my marriage of almost 10 years. I was working almost 20 hours a day at my job. Staff had left one of the offices at which I worked, and the owner of the company had asked if I could cover their job as well as mine for a short period of time until they got a replacement. I would work a 10 or 12-hour day, go home, and make dinner for the family, then return to work about 7 or 8 p.m., and work until 3 or 4 in the morning, then start over again at 7 in the morning. I quoted a short period of time because I was going on almost a month of this. Anyway, I continued to travel over the bridge in silence, grayness, and slow motion. I had not seen or made eye contact with anyone else during this time. I finally got over the bridge, and as I began traveling on the street, suddenly the sun was back, and I heard my music again, and everything seemed to be normal. While nothing else happened on my way home, I was unnerved for several hours after that. It was so real, and I believe I was very present in my surroundings the entire time. I don't have any medical issues that may have explained this away as a type of epileptic or any other type of event. As I said, it's been over 15 years and I still remember the whole thing as if it were yesterday. Especially the calm and feeling of everything being okay during this time. 2. Alright, so this happened a couple of weeks ago. I've told some of my friends, and every time I say it out loud, it just makes less and less sense to me. While it's not particularly horrifying, it was certainly something else. Tell me what you think of this. To start, my name's Adam. A good buddy of mine, Bailey, invited me to go to his Christian camp. Now, I'm not very religious, but I like camping, and I like him and his family, so I said I'd go. It was a beautiful place, but way different than I was expecting. Usually when you camp, you kinda keep to yourselves and set a tent up on the ground somewhere. Over here, it was like a whole community of people with trailers, tents, cabins, etc. There were daily activities and events, everyone knew each other. It was like a family reunion where I don't know anyone. Very different from how I normally camp, but I will say I had a great time and I felt very welcomed. I met lots of people, made a few pals, and learned a little more about Christianity, though it didn't sway my stance. Anyway, two of the people I met were named Emily and Mike. They were a few years older, but that really doesn't matter. Great people who love to party, and that was just dandy with me. I like to have some fun myself. I want to say it was like day 4 of my stay there, and it was around midnight. Everyone was going to bed, but the 4 of us stayed around the fire and had a few drinks. For those wondering, yes, drinking was definitely against the camp rules, but whatever, we were having fun. Mike then asks us if we wanted to go for a bit of a walk. Feeling good and not yet tired, we said sure, and off we went. Mike and I were both barefoot because why not? It's nice to feel the earth under your feet. And it didn't slow us down much, so we rolled with it for the stroll. We weren't just going to take a walk through the grounds, though. We decided to go across the road and take the trail for a little hike. So we did just that. Bailey and Emily led the way with the lantern, and Mike and I followed right behind, drinks in hand. After a couple stops to chat and take a quick rest, we continued on our journey. We were probably about 2 kilometers away from the camp when Mike and I suddenly realized Bailey and Emily had marched right on ahead, leaving the 2 of us behind. It didn't seem to make much sense, though, because they were right in front of us the whole time. It's like they triple-timed their walking. We didn't think anything of it. We also weren't too worried because Mike had basically grown up at this place. He's been going there for the last 30 years or so and knows the trails very well. We had some moonlight, and it's not like our eyes didn't work. So we just decided to take our time, chill out, and enjoy the beauty of the night. However, if anything did happen, my phone was dead and Mike didn't have his on him, so in hindsight, that was probably a mistake. We stopped for a few minutes so Mike could have a smoke and we chatted about some deeper topics. Or at least it felt deep. Mike and I were really bonding, and it seemed like we could have kept our conversation going for hours. But out of nowhere, we hear this sort of screaming sound probably around 50 meters away. Now we're in the woods of Canada. Lots of things make strange noises. We were trying to figure out what it could be. Mike said cougar, I said fox. It screamed again, and we couldn't quite determine which of the two. If either, it could be. So we hushed and waited for it to do it again. It took a couple minutes, so naturally we got to talking again. But when it did scream, it wasn't quite the same as the first two. Something sounded a little off about it. The distance seemed to stay the same, so our concern didn't necessarily grow. But our curiosity almost certainly did. Then we really stayed quiet so we didn't miss it or mishear it with our talking. It took less than a minute this time, and it was clear as day in a weird cougar fox-like scream. Adam! Mike and I just stood for a second and looked at each other. Mike said to me, "Did it just say your name?" I stayed quiet as I looked into the woods. I say with certainty it wasn't a human, so I knew it wasn't Bailey or Emily looking for us or anything. Plus, it was in the opposite direction of where we had to go and where they went. As I'm trying to process what I heard and making an attempt at rationalizing it in my head, my thoughts are interrupted by another scream, just as clear and loud as before. Adam. I turned to Mike and said, "Yep, that's definitely my name. The fuck is that?" Mike had a little chuckle and said he didn't know. As I started to follow up with my worries, he shushed me and said to wait. He wanted to hear it again. I suppose I did too, but by this point I just wanted to start heading back. I was getting increasingly uncomfortable. After the third time hearing this thing scream my name, I said to Mike, "Okay, let's get out of here. I'm not sure I want to meet whatever that is." He complies, but starts talking about how he isn't worried because God's right there with him and stuff, which is fine, but it brought me little comfort. We start making our way down the trail. We took a shortcut because if we took the trail, it would have been roughly another 2 kilometers back. So we barefoot bushwhacked until we ended up on the trail again. We reached the hill where the trail began, and I heard Bailey make a sort of caw sound. Mike and I returned with our own caw and began making our way down the hill, had a laugh about how instead of calling our names, he's making crow noises at the base of the trail. When we got to the bottom of the trail, Bailey had informed us that we had been missing for about an hour and a half, and that him and Emily, with Mike's wife, were getting pretty worried. Mike and I were blown away. We could have swore it was no more than half hour or so. Maybe the time thing was just the drinks, but I swear on everything I care about that something was screaming my name, something Mike or I couldn't identify. We went back up the following night, just to the top of the hill, but we got nothing, no screams, hardly any noise at all, really, which in itself is uncomfortable for a forest. It was just an unnerving experience, and I'd be cool if it never happened again. Any input on what we might have heard that night would be appreciated. Thanks for listening. 3. Hello. I've been debating about posting this for a while, but my friend said I should. I want to state that this incident is 100% true, but maybe explainable. This happened 2 years ago, during late August of 2020. Me and a good friend of mine, Sam, were going on a 2-day, 1-night camping trip deep in the Sierra Nevada mountains of Northern California, 40 miles north of Yosemite. We were scouting deer ahead of the season. We parked on the side of a 2-way highway, which was around 7,000 feet in elevation, and started walking straight up the mountain. We had come upon a clear, flat meadow and decided it was a good place to camp. Once we set up camp, we climbed up about 9,000 feet and came upon another meadow. We will call this the Upper Meadow. This had the most beautiful views I have ever seen on the Sierra Nevadas. At this point, I was tired and Sam wanted to explore the rest of the Upper Meadow. I want to say it was about 350 to 400 yards long. The grass was about waist high. We had brought a small little camping chair that fits in one of our packs. Sam wanted to explore and I wanted to sit and see the view and eat a snack. So we decided to split up. It was about 15 minutes later when I got this weird feeling. It wasn't necessarily a scared feeling, but more than putting me on edge, it felt like something was watching us. So I decided to get up and try and find Sam and reconnect. It took me 6 whole minutes to find him, which didn't really make any sense. It was a fairly long meadow, but 6 minutes just felt too long. Something was off about this meadow. While writing this, Sam and I both just got goosebumps looking back at that moment. For some reason, we can't remember now, but eventually we met back up and we went to the top of the mountain. At this point, we decided to go to the top of the mountain and looked around, and then decided to go back down. Once we had gotten back to camp, we decided to eat dinner and go to sleep around 9:30 p.m. This is where it gets interesting. Once we had gone to bed, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Animal sounds here and there, but after around 45 minutes we had both fallen asleep. It wasn't until, I'm thinking 12:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of what I thought was a branch getting smacked against a tree. This went on for a while, and it was coming from all around. As I was laying in my sleeping bag listening to this, it suddenly stopped. Now, one thing I forgot is where we set up camp. It was next to the edge of a straight climb up the mountain. The reason I say that is that I heard or felt a sound, kind of like running, but The thud of its footsteps sounded like really heavy. The only thing I could think of during that time was WTF is going on out there, and I just couldn't move. I could hear this thing running around until it suddenly stopped. And then I heard it again. When I heard it run, it almost sounded like it was on 2 legs. This happened 4 or 5 times, then it all stopped for good. The next morning, I woke up to see if I could find anything about what happened during the night, but found nothing. It was the strangest thing. Sam didn't hear anything, so he didn't believe me at the time, but now, looking back, he feels differently. I don't know what to make of this whole situation. Writing this made my blood run cold. Ever since then, I have had so many questions and no answers. I'd love feedback from all of you. 4. I know I always say that I am an overprotected child. I am. But sometimes I have my freedom. That only lasted a while. Some time ago, me and my family went to a city close to ours to visit family. Everything was fine. We had lots of fun, and I saw my cousins that I haven't seen for a while. We decided to go camping, but returned to my aunt's home some hours after, a little traumatized, which is another story. But more than traumatized, I was intrigued. I wanted to see and explain what happened in the woods. So I begged my mom to let me stay another day. She said that she and my dad had to work the next day. I was on vacation and didn't have school. My aunt then infers that I can stay, that she can take care of me. My parents trusted her. Bad idea. My aunt was a remarried woman, and the guy she married was not much to my family's liking. He had lots of money, but he is very arrogant and selfish. Once we did a party to celebrate my great-granny's 99th birthday at my aunt's house. He got mad and kicked out all of us. We didn't even get to sing happy birthday. But luckily, he was on a business trip and we were alone. I always feel something off of him. Everything was good. My cousins and I tried to return to the woods to continue investigating. But for some reason, we got the feeling that we were not going to make it, so we decided to return and go to the cinema. When we got out, it was almost 10 p.m. I called my parents to tell them that I was still there and wasn't on my way. They said it's okay, but if I was returning home, I should do it the next day, because it was really late. I should have clarified. My mother left me her car so that my cousin could return me, since his car broke down in the accident in the forest. My mother left hers just in case. Me, as a very stubborn child, decide to still return that night and don't obey. At first, I needed to say goodbye to my aunt and go for some things I left there. At the time we arrived at the house, I only heard shouting from inside the house. One of my cousins covered my ears, but was in vain. The husband, Chobi, was home. When he saw me there, he freaked out, started yelling at me that I shouldn't be there, I was not family, and etc. I explained to my aunt I was taking my leave. She said the same thing my parents said, and I was about to agree until Chobi interfered and said I wasn't allowed to stay in his house for the night, and that I should return home. I obey him because I fear Chobi. There's something weird in him that creeps me out. When me and my cousin were about to go out, Chobi again interfered and said that I'm old enough to be by myself and ride a car. It should be noted that I am 16 years old and I'm just learning to drive. But since it was night on a not-so-busy road, I could go well. He didn't let my cousin or my aunt come with me, and they fear him a lot. He once slapped her. Yeah, maybe Chobi gives you everything you need and maintains for you, but you need to obey him, and if you don't, bear with the consequences. So I packed my things and put them in the car. It was a short ride, like 2 hours. If I go now, I could arrive at 12 a.m. and surprise my parents, because they're still worried for me. So my aunt walked me to the car and apologized for the 3rd time. I started to ride, and everything was fine. I was slow because I'm still learning. But shortly after I had been on the road for an hour, it started to rain very hard. The truth is, I felt very happy because my city was in a drought, so a rain was something miraculous. I slowed a bit more just to be cautious. But for some reason I got lost. I didn't know where I was anymore. I called my aunt, but nothing. My cousins I even called Chobi because I was really stressed because I was alone at night, lost. That's how horror movies begin. I calmed down and started to drive again. I found a motel in the middle of the road. It wasn't weird because it was a well-used road some times of the year, but it should be open, so I went there. The place looked very run down, but it had a sign saying there were vacant rooms. I didn't hesitate and went inside, but for some reason I felt really weird. I didn't care at the time. It was late. I was wet and I wanted to sleep. I get inside and there was a receptionist, a woman in her 50s. She looked at me weirded, and after a talk she told me that she can't do anything. I can't have a room because I'm underage. But at the time, a guy in like his 20s came and said he was the owner. Of course, it was a weird situation, but that I can have a room, and gave me a key with a creepy smile. I take it and smile awkwardly. The receptionist was there with a really worried face. I was on my way to my room when I heard someone crying. I see in the distance a woman, but I felt she wasn't normal. I can see the dead sometimes, and I know when someone is not here. I ignored her. I didn't go there to talk to ghosts, so I went to my room. But I couldn't sleep. Something was bothering me. Then I started to hear whispers. That is normal, to be honest. I normally have my earplugs, and I can't hear anything anymore. But I could still hear a voice saying, "Get out of here." That's when I decided to listen, and went out to the car, and stayed there for a moment. Then I saw it, the owner trying to get inside my room with a key. When he entered and saw I wasn't there, he rushed outside and started to scream, heading to my car. I rapidly hid in the lower part. He peeked inside. The fear was killing me, and little by little the tears began to come out. I had to get out of there as fast as possible. He didn't see me, luckily. I guess I called my grandpa, police chief. He said he would do anything possible to save me, but I needed to get away from there. As soon as the owner left, I saw an opportunity to get in front of my car as fast as possible. But there was a problem. I left the keys in the room. I started to cry more when I heard tapping on the window. It was the receptionist. I thought I was going to die there. I thought it was the end, but then she showed the keys and left them there. She helped me. She saved me. The owner started to return screaming. I peeked and he was really mad. He then cursed and sees the ghost woman in the pool. The man rushes there. I don't know if he was thinking it was me, but my opportunity to get the keys and run away was now or never. I did it. I turned on the car, and as soon as I do it, I see the man and he started to run toward the car. I rushed to get out of there. 5 minutes into the road and the car was behind me, all speed. It was my end, but I don't know. God, my grandpa, and Dad arrived with a police car. My mama has a tracker on my phone and her car, so they knew where I was. I saw the car passing beside me and returning to where it came. I stopped the car and started crying out loud, and that was the most terrific day ever. I arrived home and told them everything. My grandpa immediately investigated. After some weeks, the guy was arrested, and turns out he was a fugitive. He attacked women, and came to kill 2. I suspect that one of them was the crying woman. When I asked him about the receptionist, he told me that they just found the guy alive. He asked me how the woman looked, and I gave them a description. His face turned pale. He showed me a picture, asking if this was the woman. I said yes, it was her, but she looked more healthy in the pic and happier. Turns out that she was the last victim. He was going to do the same to me. I was saved by ghosts, by spirits. Sometimes I said that my gift of seeing paranormal things is a curse, but sometimes I feel like a blessing. I could have been dead, but I survived thanks to spirits. You should be afraid of the living, not dead people. Before I go, I want to add that my stepbrother's wife is pregnant, and she let me choose a baby name, a girl. I called her Elizabeth. Elizabeth was the name of the victim, the name of the woman who saved me, and the name of the woman that I owe my life. 5. I genuinely don't even know where to start here. I had so many experiences at this location than any other I've ever been to. Never mind lived in. Some background details may help. My parents split up when I was a kid, around 6 or 7. My dad passed when I was 18. My mum and I did a lot of moving around. We've probably lived in at least 4 houses and 3 apartments. Don't get me wrong, I've had experiences at almost all of these places, but nothing has ever been quite as strong or strange as the little blue old orchard house. Things from this house have definitely followed us. You can choose to believe me or you can choose not to, that's up to you, but this is the true story of my experiences. I've always been super intuitive and extremely open to the spirit world, but I've also always been extremely careful. It started when I was a kid. I would mainly say things that made my parents and others say or think, "I was just about to say that." It was extremely frequent to the point my dad used to actually be quite creeped out by it. As I got older, I have gotten more and more open and have now had many encounters. I believe I began to open up the most at the old orchard house, which is probably why I remember so many of my experiences. My mom is also extremely open and intuitive. My very first experience was the first time I was home alone. We moved in, got settled, made the place cozy, and my mom went back to work on the Monday. For some reason I can't remember, I was home alone for a couple of hours on this day. This didn't bother me at all. I was 10, maybe 11. But I've always been mature for my age, so my parents had no issue with leaving me alone for a couple of hours. But nothing too long. Our staircase had a square hole cut out of the wall about halfway up for some reason. Apparently they were used to call whoever was in the kitchen, but it also worked perfectly for putting photos on top of the pantry. It happened to be aligned with. On this day, I was sat on the couch watching TV with our old dog, Sam. All of a sudden, a picture frame flew off of this pantry. When I say flew, I mean flew off of the pantry, halfway across the room. Sam got up and growled directly at the kitchen. Cackles up and everything. I wasn't scared or bothered in the slightest bit for some reason. I decided to go pick up the picture frame, and although I wasn't scared, it felt like something wanted me out. So I decided to take Sam outside and wait for my mom to get home. When she got up to the front deck, I told her what happened, and she wanted to examine the picture frame and noticed it absolutely did not get thrown in the slightest. The pantry was about 6.5 or 7 feet high, as well as being a delicate frame, but there was zero visible damage. Another short story, but fun, from that house was when my mom and I were sat watching a scary movie. I believe this was near Halloween of 2011, when we both heard very distinct footsteps going up the staircase, then slowly coming back down. Whoever it was wanted to get their steps in, as this happened about 3 or 4 times in total. Apparently neither of us were bothered by this, and we just asked each other if we were hearing the same thing. Muted the TV for a minute, then went back to watching our movie. Those footsteps became pretty much a daily and nightly occurrence. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 292. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button and share the video with friends and family. I greatly appreciate it. Well, let's see. I don't think we've got any shoutouts today as far as I know. Nope, there are none. So let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what is one thing that you find worth staying awake for? You know, those moments where you think, okay, I'm getting tired, about time to go to bed, should probably go to sleep. But oh, there's this other shiny thing and I could make myself stay awake just a little bit longer. I'm going to say a new episode of any of my favorite TV shows. Favorite TV shows, of course, will change as time moves on. And I think it's always worth making a little extra time in the day or losing a little bit of sleep just to enjoy that, because it's good for the brain overall, I think. But I'm curious to hear what your ideas are, so please let me know what you think in a comment below. Okay, with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.